Hello, this is part 4 of question mark. I'll have to speak faster and say less. This is getting into be quite the complicated, just to cover my little career. Anyway, now I'm in Easton, okay? And I opened this publishing office to do the book, and I'm getting busy planning to distribute it and everything around the state, and it's the bicentennial year. And I'm not in the office. They connected my telephone back when there were landlines and you didn't have a phone until they hooked up your landline. At least the phone, you didn't have to crank it on the wall. I'm not that old, but I do remember those. And it wasn't a party line. So I ordered a phone to be hooked up, and I'm waiting because I had to start making a lot of calls because you'd have to go to the library and look up telephone directories of other cities and on and on. And I finally was heading down to the square for my daily walk, and I see a demolition crane, giant demolition crane in front of today's Quadrant Book Mart at the corner of North 3rd Street and Church Street, across from the First Church and on 3rd Street, and which is a Revolutionary War era church, and the Quadrant was a beautiful 1800s building, but I noticed it was vacant, and all of a sudden a demolition crane with a wrecking ball. I thought that can only mean one thing. Just again, by coincidence or serendipity, I asked someone passing by, what's this all about? And they said, well, the Redevelopment Authority is for urban renewal is pulling this building down. And that's the crane, and it's coming down real soon. And I said, well, who? What? So I went, and I saw that they had a meeting that evening. I thought, well, I'm not going to this meeting alone. I don't know who these people are, and they don't know me with my accent and everything. Some outsider, although I was a new business owner in town. And my office was 2 doors away from the Quadrant about, in a beautiful brownstone at 32 North 3rd Street. So I went to a hardware store and bought a big piece of, tall piece of material, about 10 feet high, trimmed it to the shape of a tombstone, and I carried it into the center square, and I had a big sign on it saying, "Rest in peace." I stepped towards an uglier Easton in order to draw attention, and I had a signature because I wanted to get a petition going, and I had a way of doing that, and this would attract attention. People would sign the petition if they're interested, and then I could take that with me to tonight's meeting, impromptu. Speaking of impromptu, all of these videos are impromptu, unscripted, and unedited. Meanwhile, so I got about 200 signatures within 10 minutes. People were furious that building's coming down. Although some people said, this isn't the way to go about it, you know. I'm going, it's coming down, I heard, in 2 weeks. This is the way. It'll be too late if you get bogged down in the way to stop the demolition. Please, I'm going to go to the meeting and find out why. Why are they pulling it down? Maybe they have a good reason. So I went to the meeting. It was not on the agenda. I was not on the agenda. They did not have to talk to me, technically. But I was the only member, as far as I recall, this is all my recollections of 43 years ago almost, that I was the only one there from the public, and they're going over their business, and then they had any other business, and I raised my hand. It was an evening meeting, and I said, I see a wrecking ball and a demolition crane in front of, it was called the Caris building, I believe, on Church Street. But it had been vacant. I didn't know that tenants had been thrown out because of this big plan. I knew nothing about any demolitions in Easton that had occurred. I hadn't done my graduate study for about another 15 years to learn all this. So I was naive. I think if I had known the scope of what was planned and what had already happened, I wouldn't have even tried. I'd figure it's too big and I'm just one little person. So I said, so why are you pulling it down? Well, we're not going to, it's not on the agenda. We have another meeting every month. You'll have to come back. I said, no, in a month it's coming down. They told me it was coming down in 2 weeks. It's too late to put the brakes on now. I said, well, actually, that's not true. I said, the building's still sitting there. In a month, it'll be too late. But right now, it's not too late. So would you please tell me why? They wouldn't. And besides, who am I? With my accent, my Australian and London and Welsh accent. Who the heck is this troublemaker? So I said, well, I'm an architect. I'm new in town. I just opened a book publishing office this week, and I'm publishing a book about the historic architecture of Pennsylvania, my home state, in Harrisburg, where it was my hometown, at the Capitol, and I would like to know why. You might have a good reason. I might agree with you. There could be a very good reason. Out with the old, in with the new. I was a modernist architect most of my life. Well, it's all part of the big plan. Oh, really? Big plan? Tell me more. They wouldn't. So I said, well, I want to see the big plan. I can read plans, and please show me. And they wouldn't. They refused to, because it's up at the other building, which was 3 blocks away or more up to City Hall on a big hill, and it was nighttime. And this was down at the Redevelopment Authority office downtown, and I said, well, I can wait. I think I would rather wait, because if I come back in a month, it's too late. So I'll sit down and wait for you to go get the big plan, if you don't mind. They were furious. And they're like, and finally, and I staged a one-person sit-in. As far as I was aware, there was no press there. But people were taking stenography minutes. Maybe it's still somewhere if it hasn't been shredded. So I waited and waited. And these days, they would call the police, put me in handcuffs, and take me to jail, probably. But back then, people didn't act like that. They had respect for people who had different opinions. Can you imagine that? So I waited, and finally one person said to the other, I could hear them mumbling up on the dais. They were all these men sitting up there with their attorneys, and me. Oh, go get the GD plan. Get rid of this guy. Maybe he'll, So they brought down this plan, unfurled it like the Dead Sea Scrolls, this bird's eye view of the New Easton, and it was enormous in its scope. And they said, this building, this coming down with the demolition crane, is the first phase of the first building in the final phase. We've already had 3 phases, and this is the 4th phase. I said, you've had 3 phases? What's that all about? Unbeknownst to me at the time, they demolished 64% of the city before I showed up, from 1946 to 1976. 64% at my count later when I did my graduate research, which is part of this independent study and part of this oral history the museum's doing in January 2019. Really? You mean more than this building is coming down? And they showed me this, unfurled this big moonscape that went wholly out to 7th Street. There was no monument, no center square. I said, where did the square go? Where did the monument go? Where did the First Church go? Where did 3rd Street go? Where did Northampton Street go? And where did everything go? It's all gone, replaced by these ugly 1 or 2 story warehouse buildings and crap that I said, this is the new Easton? I moved to Easton because I loved the historic architecture I saw, and it's all coming down with a parking garage in each quadrant of the former square. I said, well, I guess since it's a bird's eye view, if I were a bird flying over Center Square, looking down, I might agree that it's beautiful in that it's symmetrical. And the ancient Greeks and architects said, and artists said, symmetry is beauty. So there is some beauty in the symmetry, but that's where it ends. And I'm not a bird. I'm an American citizen who, and then I heard and learned, because they let it mention, well, it's all this money's tied up and hundreds of millions have been spent, and how many 100 million more of federal money in it. The contracts are signed, the demolition contracts are signed, the paving contracts are signed. It's too late. We can't. I said, oh, well, tell me more. What about this federal money? Unbeknownst to them, I had worked for the federal government, as I had mentioned, in Providence, Rhode Island, and I knew you couldn't spend 5 cents of federal money without an environmental impact statement back then. Now, probably not. And I assumed that was true across the United States. I don't know for a fact. I didn't know then. But I said, okay, now all this federal money, you're going to have to send it back if you didn't do an environmental impact statement. I was semi-bluffing because I'm not an attorney, but I knew enough about the regulations to think maybe at least it might stall this demolition long enough that they have to send the money back every June 30th, and they'll never get it again, because if they didn't spend it, they would technically never get it again. Another district, there's 435 congressional districts, they're all screaming for that money, and if this place doesn't want it, they'll give them to that one. It's a one-shot deal usually, I learned, federally. So I thought, well, I'll try that. And they couldn't show me, wouldn't or couldn't show me this statement. So I said, well, okay, since I can't see the statement to justify spending all this money, I'm going to have to assume there isn't one, and I'm going to go to Washington, D.C. tomorrow morning, get a federal preservation lawyer, and file a federal court injunction and try to stop this. Thanks for your time. And I walked out the door thinking, where's Washington? I don't have a car. I just landed here. I'm in jet lag. They've got to have a bus. So the next morning, I'm walking down to the bus station early to try and get a bus to Washington. I assume if they have one to New York, they've got to have one to Washington. Probably take me all day. That's okay. I had time. And somebody's tapping on my window. Are you the gentleman causing all that trouble at last night's meeting? And I think I kept them there till probably midnight. And I knew enough to know there's so much money involved in concrete and paving and everything. I'm going to make a lot of enemies. So I said, well, who wants to know? And she said, I want to help you. I'm going to try and stop this. I've been trying. I couldn't.